They didn't ask. They didn't warn me. One morning, I woke up to the sound of digging, huge machines carving a trench straight through my land. Turns out, my local HOA had decided to build a water pipeline right across my ranch. No permission, no negotiation, just assumption. I tried to stop them, but they threw legal jargon at me like confetti. Community benefit, they said. Common good. But to me, it felt like theft. This ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. It's not just land, it's our history, our home. So, I did what anyone would do when pushed too far. I started digging of my own. Not a trench, but into records. Weeks of research led me to something surprising. The source of their pipeline water wasn't owned by the city or even the HOA. It was private and for sale, a forgotten spring at the edge of the county line. A deal later, it was mine. Now here's the twist. They didn't know I bought it. Not at first. But when the taps ran dry and the HOA started scrambling for answers, that's when I showed up. Calm, quiet, and holding the one thing they needed. What happened next? Well, let's just say they learned the hard way that you don't cross someone who knows how to dig deeper. See, the HOA wasn't just piping water. They were profiting from it, selling access to homeowners in the area, charging monthly fees, building their whole little empire off that supply. They thought no one would notice, especially not someone like me, a rancher living just outside their borders. But what they didn't count on was how much I cared about this land, or how much I hate being pushed around. The more I dug, the worse it got. Turns out, that permit for the pipeline was shaky at best. A lot of assumptions, some quiet handshakes. But no one thought to check who owned the source feeding their precious supply. It had been passed around over the years, forgotten really. That spring had once served old farms, but those dried up and the land went quiet. Until now. I remember standing by that spring after the papers were signed. It didn't look like much. Just a trickle coming out of the hillside, but I knew exactly what I had. Control, and maybe even a little justice. The HOA started getting complaints within days. Lawns turning yellow, pools sitting half full. Then they started calling, first politely, then not so politely. Meanwhile, I kept quiet, watching, waiting, letting them feel the pressure rise, drop by drop. Soon, the HOA sent someone out to have a conversation. He showed up in a buttoned-up shirt, clipboard in hand, smiling like this was just a friendly visit. Said he was part of the board, wanted to clear up a little misunderstanding. I didn't say much, just listened, offered him a seat on the porch, and poured us both some coffee. He danced around the topic for a while before finally getting to it. The water, or rather, the lack of it. He asked if I'd accidentally disrupted the flow. I told him there was no accident. That's when his tone shifted. The friendly mask slipped just a little. He started mentioning contracts, responsibilities, the needs of the community. I asked him to show me one, any contract that gave them the right to run a pipeline across my land. He couldn't. I think that's when he realized just how deep they were in. Meanwhile, I started hearing from neighbors. Some angry, some curious. A few even supportive once they learned the truth that the HOA never owned the source and never asked permission to use my property. One older couple from down the road told me they'd always had problems with the HOA. Hidden fees, strict rules, no transparency. This water mess was just the latest storm. But storms, as we all know, don't just blow over, they build. It wasn't long before things got real tense. The HOA held an emergency meeting, and though I wasn't invited, word travels fast in a small community. They were in full panic mode. Homeowners were furious, demanding answers, threatening lawsuits. Sprinkler systems had failed, gardens were dying, and summer was just heating up. The HOA tried to spin it, saying it was a temporary supply disruption, but people weren't buying it anymore. Then came the letter, certified, stamped, full of legal threats. They claimed I was interfering with critical infrastructure, said I was obligated to reopen the water flow under some vague easement law, but I'd already had lawyers comb through every inch of paperwork. The asterisk was asterisk no easement, no agreement, nothing in writing. They had built that pipeline banking on me not noticing or not caring. Still, they didn't back down. In fact, they doubled down. I started seeing unfamiliar trucks near my property line, people inspecting the area, taking photos, sometimes just sitting in their cars watching. One even parked by my gate for nearly an hour before finally driving off when I walked out with my phone recording. They were trying to intimidate me. Then came the letter, certified, stamped, full of legal threats. They claimed I was interfering with critical infrastructure, said I was obligated to reopen the water flow under some vague easement law, but I'd already had lawyers comb through every inch of paperwork. The asterisk was asterisk no easement, no agreement, nothing in writing. They had built that pipeline banking on me not noticing or not caring. Still, they didn't back down. In fact, they doubled down. I started seeing unfamiliar trucks near my property line, people inspecting the area, taking photos, sometimes just sitting in their cars watching. One even parked by my gate for nearly an hour before finally driving off when I walked out with my phone recording. They were trying to intimidate me, pressure me, maybe even scare me into giving in, but they didn't understand who they were dealing with. This was no longer about water. This was about respect, and the fight was just getting started. A few days later, just as I thought things couldn't get any messier, I got a call from the county office. The woman on the line sounded hesitant, almost like she didn't want to say it. She told me there had been a recent request to review my land use records. Someone had filed a complaint claiming I was mismanaging a natural resource and intentionally obstructing community infrastructure. In plain terms, they were trying to paint me as a public nuisance. That's when it clicked. The HOA wasn't just fighting for their water anymore. They were coming after me personally. It got worse. A local news outlet ran a short piece, nothing major, but just enough to stir the pot. Ranch owner blocks water access to neighborhood. No mention of the pipeline trespass, no mention of the spring being mine. Just a picture of my fence and a lot of assumptions. The comments section lit up. Some folks called me selfish. Others defended me. But the damage was done. The HOA was turning this into a public war. Then, late one evening, I noticed the water pressure gauge on the spring's main valve had dropped. I went to check it and saw signs of tampering. Someone had tried to open the line manually, likely hoping to restore the flow without me noticing. That's when I realized they weren't going to stop playing dirty, and neither was I. The next day, I went to the spring and waited. I knew they would come, and they did. It was the same crew of HOA workers, but this time they weren't just trying to intimidate, they had tools in hand. They were planning to fix what I'd broken. As I watched them approach, I took a deep breath. This was it, the final stand. I walked out into the open, facing them down. There were at least 4 of them, all carrying the kind of attitude that said they'd been told they could do whatever it took. The lead guy, the same one who'd come by for that friendly visit weeks ago, looked at me with that same smug smile. But this time, I wasn't backing down. "Turn it off," I said. He laughed, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. "You can't just take what isn't yours. This is my land, my water." He started to say something, but I didn't let him. I pulled out the paperwork, the legal documents that proved my ownership. Everything was in order. I knew I had them cornered. "If you don't leave now, I'll file charges for trespassing and tampering with private property." For a long moment, it felt like nothing was happening. Then, without warning, the lead guy's phone rang. He answered it, and his face drained of color. He hung up quickly, turned to his crew, and muttered something about recalibrating the approach. They left, just like that. I stood there for a moment, watching them go. But as I turned back to the spring, I noticed something else, something that made my stomach twist. Hidden behind the trees was another truck, parked at the far edge of my land. Someone had been watching the whole time. I didn't feel relief. Not yet. I realized then that this wasn't over. The HOA might have backed down for now, but they weren't done with me. And worse, whoever was out there had their own agenda. For a long moment, it felt like nothing was happening. Then, without warning, the lead guy's phone rang. He answered it, and his face drained of color. He hung up quickly, turned to his crew, and muttered something about recalibrating the approach. They left, just like that. I stood there for a moment, watching them go. But as I turned back to the spring, I noticed something else, something that made my stomach twist. Hidden behind the trees was another truck, parked at the far edge of my land. Someone had been watching the whole time. I didn't feel relief. Not yet. I realized then that this wasn't over. The HOA might have backed down for now, but they weren't done with me. And worse, whoever was out there had their own agenda.